Well, let's talk about all this and bring in our bureau chiefs. Robert Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa bureau chief for La Presse. Nice to see the three of you.
Nice to see
Thank you for having us.
So here we have this new Arctic foreign policy from Canada, although interesting to note that when you look at the document, it actually talks about the North American Arctic. You know, Bob, let's begin with you here. What does that signify to you? A shift in how we're viewing the region?
Yes, in this sense that we don't have the resources to, with the melting sea ice and the world looking at these as trade routes and potential oil and gas and other mineral development, that we're going to need the United States to confront Russia, which has built a number of modern military bases in the Arctic. China has been cooperating with them on military exercises, has been sending their own ships into the area. So I think this is a realization that if we're going to try to deal with with the threat from China and Russia, that we're going to need the Americans. They've also reached out to the other Nordic countries who are also bordering the Arctic to be able to work with Canada as well. In the past, as you know, we've always said we have to assert our sovereignty, even at the expense of the Americans. So this is a shift in terms of the thinking of the Canadian government.
Yeah, a shift. You know, and when you say that, I'm thinking about the Donald Trump first term when he basically talked about Canada's illegitimate claims to the Northwest Passage. You're right, a lot of talk about Canadian sovereignty, but now North American Arctic. What do you make of the turn, Tonda?
Well, look, I think that it's a bit making virtue of necessity, isn't it? They have to deal with that as a concern. Otherwise, there are many in senior policy-making offices in this country that think if we don't do it, the Americans will. So asserting your sovereignty is one thing, but asserting it in concert with the U.S. is something we have to do at this moment. Like Bob said, we don't have the resources to do it all ourselves in any event. So reaching out to allies, not just the U.S., but the other Nordic countries, is not just good politics, it's good policy for them right now. But that said, I think the show of it and the political display that it was, incorporating the Indigenous leaders, the premiers, and all those ministers, was as much the message. Today, the medium was the message. I mean, it was a display, wasn't it, of strength and a flex.
Yeah, flex, as you say. What do you make of that, though? Because, you know, what's interesting is this flex is coming months after the defense Arctic policy, which I'll get to in a moment. But what do you make of the show that we saw today?
Well, how long will it last? I mean, this government is at the end of its mandate, basically, the Liberal government. What will the new government elected, if the Liberals are defeated, what will it do with that kind of policy? Will it start anew? Will it launch a new task force, a new thinking? There was a lot of work done within Foreign Affairs on this issue, but there was a lot of pressure coming from the United States for a while. I think Bob is right. We cannot patrol this on our own. And there is such a state as Alaska being north also that has an interest. So that's why the United States is using this to probably to impose, not impose, but suggest some routes to Canada as to how we should defend it. But will the dollars also flow with that kind of policy? Because this is not only naming an ambassador to the Arctic. From Canada's perspective, we need to invest to secure the North in a big way, and that means military spending increase in the North as well.
Yeah, and what does that military spending mean? Does it mean roads to the North? Does it mean deep water ports to the North? Does it actually mean arms, icebreakers? Yeah. They talk about icebreakers. A lot of money for a government that's already very much in the red. You know, Bob, Joël-Denis was talking about how this has been a priority for the United States, and we heard that out of the Trump dinner as well that Trudeau had Friday night, rudely after our last panel. But I mean, we've heard.
But we did wonder just how that relationship would be leveraged.
Yeah,
and we
wondered
saw it.
Most vocally by Tonda MacCharles.
You're welcome.
But you know, the United States has said the Arctic needs to be Canada's priority. We've heard that from our NATO allies. We've heard that for quite a long time. Is Canada coming late to the game, Bob?
Yeah, it's late to the game. You know, it's the old story about Canada is we talk a good game, but when it comes to money, you look around and they've gone to the washroom. It's what John Manley has said, the way our NATO allies look at us. And, you know, this policy, frankly, a year in the making to come up with what? An Arctic ambassador and setting some consulates in Anchorage, in Alaska, and in Greenland. It's kind of a disappointing, feeble effort, in my from my viewpoint, $34 million being spent on this. I'm surprised that they didn't put this together with the defense policy that was announced in April, because that was the real issue here. You know, they are doing some stuff for sure. We're going to get drones, and we're going to get underwater surveillance measures. We're going to get more tactical helicopters. We need icebreakers. This is going to take a considerable period of time. All of this, basically what our allies want us to do is to have a really significant military presence in there. And we've made the commitments, but commitments, we haven't seen the dollars flow.
Yeah.
And the commitment, in fact, all of the reasons why they outlined the concerns of Russia and Russia working with China and Russia having, you know, invaded Ukraine and being evicted from the Arctic Council, essentially, they could have done this a year ago and made it a package deal with the defense policy. So I do think it's late in the game. It's late in the government's mandate. So I think Joël-Denis is right. You know, we'll have to see how long a lifespan it has.
Yeah, well, I was at the Halifax International Security Forum, and, you know, for good or for bad, you have China and Russia, both authoritarian states that can move very quickly on military investment, churning out the number of icebreakers that we've seen Russia, despite all its military efforts in Ukraine, has been able to build. And it does beg the question of where the money is going to come from, Joël-Denis. Do you think the government has any idea where that's going to come from, or they're just putting the promise on paper?
The promise is on paper right now, but we may have to be printing more money if you want to finance this kind of endeavor that we're suggesting we want to do. And when this was announced today, I was thinking about the prior government led by Mr. Harper, who used to go every August, every visit in the North, just to show some that he did care about the North. Yes, there were not many investment, but the Prime Minister's presence sent a signal. How many times did Mr. Trudeau go up north?
He's gone on a couple of campaigns and I think one other trip.
Yeah, and that's it. But it's not a yearly exercise.
It's not a yearly
and
exercise.
in the context of a campaign as well.
Not
right?
only in the context of a campaign. He's gone up on another, at least one occasion and possibly two that I can remember.
To meet the NATO Secretary General.
But he hasn't made it, as Stephen Harper did, a yearly exercise wherein the defense and the military presence was not just showcased, but, you know, shown not just to our allies, but to Canadians to assert, look, this is worth doing. This costs money and it's worth doing. So I've often thought, like you have that, you know, where is that presence? We've missed that.
Yeah, missed that. Listen, running out of time, but I do, since we bring the subject of money up, I have to ask, fall economic statement. Usually late October, early November. Here we are in December, still not one. Is that problematic? Are there any indications of when it might be?
Well, I think they'd like to have it done next week, but it depends on the supplementary votes that are going on, and if that doesn't happen, it'll be kicked into the following week. It's coming. They would like to have it done in the House of Commons, but we don't know how long the gridlock that's going on, the filibuster is going to go on. I mean, they could do it in a committee, which they very well could do. So it's a possibility next week, but because of these votes on the supplementary SIPs, not sure necessarily where it's going to happen. But certainly before the House breaks, there will be a fall economic update, and everybody's watching for is the deficit going to be higher than what the finance minister had said? It would be no more than $40.1 billion. The Parliament Budget Officer says it's going to be over about $46.4 billion. That's what we're all going to watch for, because if she breaks her promise, it's going to cause her political problems.
Tonda?
I actually am hearing even numbers higher than that, so who knows? And to be honest, I mean, they can give those numbers without a fall economic statement. They just need to close the books, which have been closed since September, but publicly release them. And, you know, every time you ask the question, what is the number for last year's deficit? Did you hit your mark? The answer is, oh, well, the Auditor General and the Comptroller General are checking the books, and they're, you know, going to give us a stamp of approval at some point. So why haven't they got that? And why isn't that out? That doesn't need the statement even. The statement doesn't even have to need a parliamentary opening. It can be done anywhere. It can be done, as a previous finance minister has done, in a business setting. So these are all, like, everybody's wondering when isn't. You can't get a straight answer.
Yeah.
I think that economic statement may determine the political future of Chrystia Freeland. If she does not hit the marks that she said she would hit, I think her credibility will be very much in tatters. And also, it may encourage Mr. Trudeau to do a bigger shuffle than he was expecting. Maybe to bring new life into the finance department and the finance department leadership, because I think the Liberal government is also playing its credibility on this one.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's good or bad, but technically it's fall until December the 21st. Just putting it out there. Okay, Bob, Tonda, JD, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You don't like that comment.
I mean, I'm just thinking, like, a winter economic statement. Good grief.
Good grief. Okay, have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you.